It is up to the jury now in the fast-moving Susan Smith murder trial, and the war in Bosnia rages on despite new threats by the West to hit back. This is the CBS Evening News. And this is Bob Schieffer reporting. Good evening. Well, the lawyers have made their arguments, and now the case is gone to the jury in the trial of Susan Smith, the South Carolina mother accused of drowning her two young sons. Randall Pinkston is standing by in Union, South Carolina, and has our report. Randall?
Bob, less than an hour after the jury began its deliberations, they returned to the courtroom to look at a videotape of Susan Smith during last fall's hoax when she was claiming that a black man had taken her two sons. Meanwhile, Judge William Howard has instructed the jury that they have the option of finding Smith guilty of involuntary manslaughter or murder in the drowning deaths of her two sons. But Prosecutor Tommy Pope, in his opening argument, told the jury there was nothing involuntary about what Smith did to her little boys.
Throughout the trial, Susan Smith's lawyer said she knew it was wrong to kill, that she wasn't insane, and that she didn't blame anyone else for the deaths of her sons. The issue, according to defense attorney Judy Clark, was Smith's intent. With judgment growing closer, today Smith cried. The final witnesses in her defense testified she was depressed, suffering the after effects of incest with her stepfather and a predisposition to suicide like her father. Defense attorney Clark called the drownings of Smith's sons a failed suicide. When the 23-year-old mother drove to John D. Long Lake last October, Clark said she intended to kill herself and her sons, but Smith hopped out of the car as it was rolling down the ramp into the lake, with her two boys strapped in their car seats. But in a riveting closing argument, prosecutor Tommy Pope insisted Smith intended to kill her children, referring to her handwritten confession where Smith said, "I did go down the ramp part way and stopped. I went again and stopped." Pope said Smith could have stopped before her sons went to their deaths, crying out, he said, for someone to save them. The motive, according to Pope, Smith's efforts to renew a relationship with wealthy bachelor Tom Finley. In a letter to Smith 1 week before the children drowned, Finley told her he didn't want to have children or be responsible for anyone else's.
Pleading for mercy to the jury, defense attorney Judy Clark said this is not a case about evil, it's a case about despair and sadness. It's a two-part trial. If the jury finds her guilty of murder, then phase 2 begins, where they will decide if she receives the death penalty. If, on the other hand, they find her guilty of the lesser crime of involuntary manslaughter, Susan Smith could get 5 years on each count. That's up to 10 years, and she will be eligible for parole after serving 1/3 of her sentence. Bob?
Well, Randall, let's go back to that. How could the jury decide that she's guilty of involuntary manslaughter?
Well, a lot of us were wondering that same thing, and here's the explanation. You have to buy the defense attorney's theory, which is that she intended to commit suicide and take her sons with her. Now, as long as she intended to commit suicide, she also intended to commit murder. But when Susan Smith jumped out of the car, the intent to commit murder disappeared, and rather to commit suicide disappeared, and so did the intent to commit murder. At least that is what the defense attorneys are trying to sell this jury.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Randall. One day after the NATO allies warned Bosnian Serbs that there is now strong support for massive airstrikes if they attack another Bosnian safe haven, the Serbs expanded their assault into the Bosnian capital of Sarajevo. One rocket hit an apartment. At least 2 were aimed at the presidency. Those attacks came as Secretary of State Christopher and the other top U.S. officials who attended the London meetings spent part of this afternoon at the White House with President Clinton. Cheryl Atkinson has the latest now from there.
Secretary of State Warren Christopher returned from the emergency London meeting on Bosnia for a high-level White House strategy session with the President, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Shalikashvili, UN Ambassador Madeleine Albright, and top aides. On the agenda, what specific actions the U.S. military might be called to take should the Allied plan go into effect. That plan calls for heavy NATO airstrikes if Bosnian Serbs launch an assault against the surrounded city of Gorazda, one of a half-dozen so-called safe havens under increasing attack. Serbs have captured Srebrenica, possibly